Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded September 14th, 2022. Good evening, Brody. Good evening, Franklin. Hello, our guest, Mike. How's everybody doing today?
Doing good. You don't look like you're in your basement this week.
I was never in my basement. I was in my office.
That's not your basement? Oh, that's upstairs. Okay.
No, I'm actually in a real office in Seattle, in one of the buildings on the Microsoft campus. Building 92, maybe. I forget.
Yeah.
So up here, getting some training, getting some technical briefing, get to see people in person that I've talked to virtually forever. Now I get to see them. I got to see Mike and see Mike since I forget the last time I was in DC. But that's not uncommon. When I come to DC, I don't get to see Frank either. So, Frank won't come see me.
Yeah, but no, I'm asking you first because I'll ask everyone first before we ask Brody because, Brody will say, well, I went on this adventure for 1 week, that sort of thing like he did last week. So I don't know if you got a chance to listen to last week about his fishing adventure or not.
Yeah, he basically made it sound like the plane broke down in midair. He climbed out on the fuselage, fixed it, and then they landed the plane. And he caught a 15-foot salmon.
Yeah, all that's accurate. That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
So was that Superman on the wings, or was that more like Twilight Zone?
A little bit of both. Yeah. You got to be old enough to get that reference, listeners. Oh, man. Oh, good week. I'm learning more about these acquisitions that Microsoft have made. They have transformed into the or added them into the Defender 4 stack. So when I say Defender 4, not the number 4, but FOR, Defender for cloud, Defender, for cloud applications, Defender for containers, Defender for identity. Now the acquisition of RiskIQ for threat intelligence has been acquired in being incubated, and they're calling it Defender for Threat Intelligence. Am I right on that, Mike? Yeah, that's right. All right. And then we're learning more about SASE and ZNTA, EPM. It's a lot to consume, right? And still,
I sent you that email with topics that we'll be talking about in the future, and I know you didn't read it, but one of them was we need to review the Defender family because there's been so much added to it, and things that are broken out that was there before, but then they gave it a name so they could charge more, things like that we really need to do an overview of everything that's in the Defender family because it's definitely has grown over the past 6 months.
I think I know the person at Microsoft who can do that. They're part of the go-to-market team and the M&O, and there's a bunch of M&O up here and go-to-market. So that person can come in and probably give you a high-level overall of what the Defender products are, were they built in-house, were they built in partnership, or were they acquired? And so these terms have been identified by Ann Johnson at Microsoft because she enlightened us onto how Microsoft either builds, partners, or acquire security companies, their criteria. And that was very interesting to hear her talk about that. But I can definitely...
the funny thing is, Edward says, hey, it's just us this week. Our guest actually couldn't make it. And I'm talking to him on the phone. He's like, yeah, I'm here in a Redmond with a room full of GBBs. I'm like, Edward, think about this. You're in a room full of GBBs, and you're saying that we don't have a guest tonight.
Well, you and I got to work on that. We have enough individuals who want to come on the show to book us out through the whole year. So we just need you and I and Brody.
If you're in a room full of people that we would love to have on our show.
Yeah, did you promote us?
No, we don't have anyone here.
I got a shout out yesterday from Critical Start. Their CTO is going to come on our podcast.
Oh, sweet. Oh, that's awesome.
I know this guy's pretty well. That's when he made that comment, Mike, about, the CTO like the podcast pointed over. I've known those guys over there. So he's going to come on, and I think one of us have to come on his podcast, which is called Son of a Breach.
That's good. I like that. That's
the name of the podcast. It's actually, he pulls in other CTOs from other and sits on some other companies. So we're going to do a little exchange information. Plus, I made the other two. I made the other two partners here jealous. Of like Red Canary's been on like 15 times. You guys coming on? So Blue Voyant is coming on. I talked to their marketing people, and I bumped into the director, professional services. You ever had that embarrassing moment when a person walks up to you, sees your face, and speaks to you with so much certainty, and then you look at him, you go, how do I know you? He says, it's Caleb.
All the time.
You trained my company like in 2017, man. You got us to adopt Microsoft security all up. And I was like, oh, yeah, up in Greenwich. Well, Rochester. And he pulled all these people over. And so they like, we will be on. We want to come on. So what else? Haven't really done a lot of Sentinel work, man. For some reason, I'm doing a lot of MDI work. And I got.
You love MDI.
I love MDI. Got a little tip too. So
here we go.
If your sensors are having errors and detecting some attacks, whether they be planned, untapped, red team, it may be because the WinCap has been upgraded to WinCap to capture traffic, and I didn't see that, and so it was missing a lot of the things that Andrea Fisher wrote a script for. She asked me to test it. Now, MDE caught it, especially when they started downloading malicious payloads. When they saw Mimikatz, MDE went off. They just started yelling, and then they started seeing processes and stuff. But I think I shared that with Mike because he has a big project that needs to be a consideration for them when you have to. And the only way you can do the sensor update, you have to remove the sensor, right? Whether it be Intune, GPO, whatever it is, how you got it installed, and it takes a complete reinstall. You can't upgrade the sensor. It has to be uninstalled and reinstalled to be able to do it. What's the bad part about that? Now you start the learning 30 days. You got to start over to repopulate that database with telemetry.
It's not going to pick up the previous machine GUID and drat. That's unfortunate.
So I tried to say, well, I can trick it. I'll update all the sensors except for one and see if it will, because they talk, right? And see if it would. It won't, because that sensor can't communicate with the old sensor to sell the telemetry across the database that sits in Azure on the, I think it's still a MongoDB database. I think that's the database for MDI. They haven't changed it to a SQL PaaS service or anything just yet. I heard there are plans to do that. For right now, it's in Mongo, and I think I know the reason why. The way the data is structured, SQL is not conducive for it. Because remember, back in the day, people were entertaining a thought of making the Exchange database a SQL variant, and people were like,
they have other database technology they can move to that will be fast enough. So
Access.
Foxborough database, yeah.
Foxborough.
Yeah, we do that. That's all I've been doing all week. I'm up here studying, learning a little bit. I'm doing the most important thing I think in anybody's career: networking, seeing people, shaking hands,
Exactly.
drinking beer. You know,
here you go. Let's see if I can get this. This is a glass from the first Fox Developer Conference.
Oh man!
In 1989.
Yep.
I didn't know dinosaurs could drink out of cups there, Frank. That's pretty cool.
Vikings.
There you go.
Another old trivia to that. The Microsoft most valuable professional came from the FoxPro team. The very first one was a FoxPro developer. I think his name was it Carmyle? It used to be called the Carmyle Awards, and then they changed it over to
not what it was. But what happened was one of the reasons why they acquired FoxPro was to compete against, of course, DBase, but they were also worried that it would actually compete against Access. So they actually acquired FoxPro for two reasons. One, to kill it so Access could live. And then the second reason was there was technology called Rushmore technology, which was basically a way to optimize queries using indexes. I mean, pretty simple that we think about it today, but they actually took that Rushmore technology and put it into SQL Server.
Oh, okay. Well, that's my extent of what I've been doing and learning. What about you, Frank? What have you broken?
Yeah. By the way, Frank, you're coming from the world's loneliest bar, apparently. Very upscale, but no guests behind you. Did you scare everybody out with licensing questions, or
No,
what?
I've been messing with my camera to try to make it better, so I had to throw up a virtual background because I'm only halfway through that. When you start a little project like that 5 minutes before the webcast starts, and think that you can finish it before, that's just doesn't work.
I love doing that in life all the time for everything. I don't know what you're talking
yeah.
about. Yeah.
I mean, last minute panic is the mother of all inventions.
Right.
Love it. What did I call you about earlier, Frank? I forget. Yeah. Anyway, called you one day. But that's all for me, Brody.
Well, hold on. Frank was going to explain. I asked about his bar. Go ahead, Frank. What have you been working on today other than your future green screen?
I have been working on absolutely nothing, doing nothing. So
nothing
at all for the past week. So
is that sarcasm?
Go ahead. No. I don't want to say what I'm doing and then be embarrassed by Brody what he's done for the past week.
I have not.
Go ahead, Brody. Go ahead, Brody.
Well, you have been reaching out to the champions that Christina reached out to work on our show, which we really appreciate. So we've got a bunch of external MVPs, Frank's aspiring position, that are going to come and join the show at one point in the future. So that's great. So you've been doing something.
I like to tell you, Brody, I have been officially nominated for the.
Well, that's great.
I have to turn in the paperwork. And
now remember, I did nominate you when you asked me when I first started co-hosting over a year ago. So if you'd like additional nominations, Edward and I can make a bunch of bullshit up and get you in there, right?
I've done it before. I've already nominated. Let me tell you something about Frank.
Yeah, please do. Go on.
Frank is a walking liability. Let me tell you why. People off. And he said something about the SharePoint team. SharePoint team talked to the Microsoft Edge team. Now our URL is flagging as an unsafe site.
Oh yeah.
I saw that. It's not just that. There's a number of sites like my fantasy football app was getting flagged by Smart Screen. I think maybe some criteria might have changed that day, but yeah, all of a sudden we're a potential phishing site.
It's only an Edge. Chrome doesn't do it. Firefox, Vidala,
Smart Screen.
Yeah, just
all right.
Smart Screen.
All right. So I got a question for you before we get on to our guest.
Okay, I didn't do anything. Frank,
one topic that I had is, where are you guys at with your certifications?
Looking ahead to the cold weather in order to renew my MS500, which is coming up. I got the 180 days.
That's going to take you an hour to do. Come on.
Oh yeah, I'm going to crush it. Don't worry about it. And then I should get the SC100 done after I warm up on the MS500 renewal.
There is no warming up on the MS500. That's easy enough.
I'm just gonna challenge. Well, yeah, it's open book, right? The renewals are open book now, which is great. But I've actually been engaging with because you asked earlier, Frank. I've been engaging with a financial institution on a lot more Azure related security, everything from data protection, encryption, key management, all kinds of Azure Synapse stuff. So I'm learning a bunch of new technologies I haven't worked with yet, given my usual stack in what was previously known as modern work. And so I think that's going to help me on this SC100 coming up here, because I have more exposure to that side of the house, let's say. So that's going to be the first one I challenge when the weather turns, probably like late October, early November. And then I don't know, because that's all the SC exams. Like I could do the AZ500.
We're still waiting for your Azure Architect. What's the deal? I mean, that's what.
I'm waiting on Brody.
Really?
500 done. AZ 500 done. SC 200 done. SC 100 done. SC 300 done.
I got all those.
I would have finished the AZ 104, but I don't
want to do that one again.
I'm waiting on Brody, man. So
I should have just renewed that one. That one's a pain. I don't want to do it again.
It's not an easy exam though.
No, I don't want to do it.
It is yeah.
I bet. Yeah, I remember going through it the first time. I failed the first time when it was the AZ 102, and then I had to retake it. And they're like, okay, hey, guess what? We're going to merge the 102 and the 103, so you don't have to take the 103. And I'm like, well, perfect. There we go. I got it. And I should have just rode that train and renewed it, because now it expired. But you know what? It is what it is. No
I didn't let mine expire. I don't know if I ever had it. I had what was his predecessor. But I got a lucky draw at the time, because in the Azure realm, I knew networking very well. And I got networking question, NSGs, express route. I'm like, oh, cool.
Did they have
So
the
now-
labs when you wrote yours, where you actually had to do the live lab and set it up? They don't have that format anymore in the Microsoft certs, but you used to have like the lockdown machine you'd have to go to at testing center would fire up like an Insta virtual machine and be like, okay, here's your virtual Azure instance, set up an NSG, do all this jazz. You've got 30 minutes. Here's the timer, and it was like stress on. They don't do that anymore. Did you have that when you wrote it?
Back then they didn't, but
Okay.
unless I'm confused, they have it now.
Oh,
they,
it's
they,
back.
No, they have performance-based testing. I actually wrote one of the scenarios for AZ700 for the
Mhm.
performance-based testing. So yeah, that's definitely back. So
When I went through the first time, I didn't pass, and it hadn't come into effect. And then I went back and had performance-based where they actually spun it up, and then I blew it out the water because you can click, and then it's performance. You get enough points per each question. It's not you get it wrong and you just don't get any points. It's like, hey, you need to accomplish this, and there's more than one way to do it. Go do these things. And
I enjoyed writing the exam question or the full performance-based testing scenario. So that was fun.
And I think that's much fair than having someone do the old, it's 4 questions, eliminate 2 of them, and then figures out which of the last 2 are the best questions. I'm like, well, what if one of them is all of the above? He's all out of gas, right? But
that's why I passed the ISSP. It was the Kirk and Spock.
It won't be all above, so don't worry about it.
If Brody doesn't want to take the 104, I'm gonna save my brain cycles, and then I'm gonna go ahead and jump into science course.
So, Brody, you should go ahead and read the DP 900 material, the data one, just so you're more familiar with all of the different technology that's out there. I'm not saying to take the test. I'm just saying you should go ahead and read that to get a lay of the land of everything out there. Once you start dealing more with Azure, you realize it's all basically the same technology, but used in a different way. So once you get the framework for everything, then you'll be good to go with all of that. So
okay, that's good advice. And just super quick on the 900 before we move on. You know, somebody last year had a really interesting idea, and that was to take. It was someone on my LinkedIn feed, and they're like, I'm going to take every 900 level test. And I just thought that was really interesting, right? Because it's that baseline, you know, level 100, we call it 900 in the test, and just kind of get that, you know, general understanding of everything. And I thought that was a really interesting approach, right? Like to kind of branch out from security or wherever you work in infrastructure. So like AI 900 or whatever that one's called. I think that'd be really fun actually to try this winter, just as a way to.
So remember, you don't have to take the test. You can just go through the learn material.
Yeah, totally.
You know, don't stress yourself out with the test.
I think that's a great idea though, because I think they don't. What do they call those 900
Fundamental
foundational exams?
Yeah, that's it. Foundational. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good idea, so that you learn and then you get associated with the buzzwords that are outside the workloads you support. So I may pick that up, but I'm going to jump back into SANS course. I finally got a voucher. Woo-hoo. So I'm gonna spend my winter on that.
So since you guys weren't here, did you see my SC 100 certification?
You printed it out?
I can't see it. It's invisible.
I know. Let me turn off the background here, so then you guys.
Oh, here we go. We can see his project.
Can see.
Whoa.
You ready? This is my SC 100 plaque.
That's a nice
plaque.
No, it's my GCFA.
Oh, okay. He renewed. I was about to say, GCFA. Hey, you got access. You got access to the new course material for that one, right?
Yep.
I might borrow it. Take a look at it.
Yeah, I can't do that. Sorry.
I give you mine. How about you take mine? I give you yours.
Nope, can't do that.
All right. Well, I paid for the course.
But I got to tell you, after redoing the course again, I am ready for the showdown with Rod Trent about Sysmon versus MDE, or should you have Sysmon if you already have MDE? I'm ready for that showdown. I actually recommended a guest to referee that whole situation.
You and I were working with a potential customer that wanted that same type of scenario because, you know,
So read the email I sent you, then you know.
Edward doesn't read email.
I do.
No, okay.
I read it. I got a filter to put Frank in a very specific box.
Looks kind of like a trash can.
Yeah. doesn't even recycle Frank's right to trash. Yeah.
Yeah. Bro, so what have you broken all week?
All right, yeah, it's super high level, and we'll get to Mike here. I know he's itching to talk about what he does, but yeah, like I've been working on insider risk with a customer a lot. I've been working again a lot of Azure data security, which is like pretty new for me, with a financial institution up north here in Canada. So that's like a cybersecurity architect role.
Azure data security is more the purview stuff, or not the purview stuff?
Man, it's a whole.
Is it the classification of the data, or is
it's everything from secure workstation in Azure to access data that's being investigated by data scientists in Azure, leveraging Azure Synapse and a bunch of I'm forgetting the terms right now where they're, and it's a lot. It's really cool and interesting. Learning about how we're managing the encryption, decryption of said information so that these data scientists can access the material, but then how do we time bound that and make sure there's proper retention and it's managed automatically so that there's no chance of exfiltration or leakage of any kind. So it's kind of borrowing a lot from my compliance/purview skill set, and it's opening up a lot of opportunities in the more Azure space that I haven't worked in prior. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Are you AZ 500? Did you do AZ 500?
I have not taken that one. I've always thought about taking it. Do you need so like conceptually I get everything under 104, right? I'm just not a NSG engineer, firewall engineer.
What I would do is anybody that's taking AZ 500, I would actually read the material for AZ 700 first.
Okay.
And then take a look at AZ 500. So I would actually just tonight, just read AZ 700 material.
Yeah, for our listeners who don't know what the AZ, those are designations that talk about the particular platform that you're testing against. So AZ obviously means Azure. The 700 in particular is the networking one, and it's hard, right? It's I read through it a couple of times. I wasn't brave enough to take the exam, but it did refresh and it did let you know how much stuff has evolved since I was a networking guy, right? Lots on SD-WAN, right? Private endpoints, API. It had API protection or something, DNS, lots of stuff.
It's actually, I think it's actually, so it has a reputation for being a hard test, but I think it's one of the best tests for you to take. And I think that once you know it, you're going to pass it. So I actually think if you know it and you work it and work with it every single day, you're going to pass it without a problem. So it's one of the tests where you actually have to be working with a product. You're not going to go study something and that sort of thing. So I think it's solid, even though it has a reputation for being hard.
I have one complaint about it. One complaint. Some of the concepts you cannot lab out because you can't afford them.
BDOS, you got the
laugh. You turn that on, you're done. Unless you have the American Express Black Card like Frank, and then you just charge everything up for Defender for IoT and everything. What'd you turn on, Frank? Did you ever get your money back?
Yeah, I complained. I got my money back because I had the case history with Microsoft support. Because there's two different Defender for IoTs. People don't realize this, right? There's the on-prem Defender for IoT, and that one's called like for device makers, one's for organizations or enterprise. I forget what they're called now. And then there's the Defender IoT, which is kind of similar to what we had with Inside, if you think about it from just the Defender for Cloud add-on sort of things, right? Yeah. And so if you actually activated the Defender for IoT, the on-prem one, which was an acquisition, I forget the name of the company.
CloudKnox.
No, it was
no. CyberX.
CyberX.
So then they would start charging you $2,000 a month, and so I wanted to turn, and you actually activated it in the portal, right? So I'm like, all right, I don't want this anymore. So what do you do with it when you're inside the Azure portal and you don't want something anymore? You delete it, right? You delete the resource, right? Oh, that was a big mistake, because when I deleted it inside the portal, there was no way for them to turn off my billing.
Mike's just rolling his eyes here. Love it.
So I had an entire casing. We're like, no, we're not going to bill you. Oh, here's the bill. Not going to bill you. So basically, I just went to American Express and said, here it is. I can't get them to stop billing me, and there's no way for me to turn it off. So what do? They said, okay, we'll do the charge back to Microsoft. I said, keep everything else on. It's just, and so I wasn't really upset with Microsoft. It's like, I understand I understand now this is an on-prem resource. This is kind of just a situation. I happen to be one of the first ones to fall into it. No big deal. You know what I mean? And so hopefully now that's been resolved in dealing with that.
Cool. Good story. Super quick before I go to Mike, but I can't read it tonight. I'm actually going on another podcast tonight. It's a double podcast for me.
What?
It's my friend's podcast. It's called, get this, you're gonna love it, Hard Liquor and Hunting Stories.
Okay. I was just about to remove you if you're going to another.
No, I'm a guest on it because we went on that trip up north. So he's having me on as a guest. So sorry, I can't write that exam tonight, Frank. But maybe
That's okay.
tomorrow. Maybe.
No, I just said read the material.
Okay. Yes. I'll read it. Let's get to our guest who's been waiting patiently for 30 minutes here.
So our guest has graciously agreed to come on. He is I don't know if he's a peer or not. We do sort of the same thing, but is your title GBB, Mike?
It is. As of Monday. It's Monday.
As of Monday. Mr. Lord is a big influencer for security in the government space. So him and Jeff Sluggerberg, who was on the show 2 shows ago, they've known each other for years. I've known of Mike. I think last time I saw you may have been 4 years ago at the night in DC, the little mini one.
Yeah,
we were up there. And so his expertise is around security parity between commercial GovCloud as well as cross-platform or cross-cloud security. So he wanted to come on and talk about a little bit about each one of those subjects, so maybe more on one than the other. But Mike, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, what you do, what's your passion, and what you think is cool.
Absolutely. So, my name is Mike Lord. I am a compliance GBB, which means I now cover the products known as Purview. So, Frank, if you just want to blow out one of your podcasts one time, go through what is Entra, what is Defender, and what is Purview. And you'll pretty much fill about 2.5 hours of content trying to figure out where all these products fall and where our marketing department decided to make things more complex.
I just want to have an entire show of making fun of the names. That would be cool.
Oh, come on. That's too easy. That's too easy. But Mike, as someone who's worked in compliance now called Purview, do you like the name? Do you like how it's all rolled up under one name? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, my actual opinion is that they're trying to find ways to bucket products together, that they're building as a platform, but they really are different skill sets, and they haven't quite pulled it all together. There's so much crossover now, and I think particularly this is one of the things that I've really focused on and why I joined the team. I was actually a security technical specialist up until Friday. So coming into compliance, I do have a background in compliance, but it really is about pulling all this data together. So I think Purview is a good start where they're trying to pull that together, but where they haven't figured out how to cross the line yet is how do you take compliance in your IaaS and PaaS services when you start talking about Azure policy and you start talking about Defender for Cloud and how you do compliance in an IaaS PaaS versus compliance in something like SaaS and how you do compliance in things like user productivity tools. And while they're different concepts, typically when you go out into the field, it's actually the same job. At least there's an executive who wants a fancy dashboard that tells them what they're doing, but it really is two disparate kind of concepts that really pull together when you get to the end user. And I think that's where ultimately where I've spent a lot of my time and what I'm really passionate about kind of driving towards is how do I take this data, all this user productivity compliance data? How do I take what my server baselines are? How do I take what my MDE TVM type of baseline risk looks like and pulling all of that data together? And it really starts becoming a broader story about how do we feed this data into Azure. And honestly, the easy button for this, even though it wasn't necessarily designed for this, the easy button for this is Sentinel, where you
Right.
start taking things and throwing workbooks on top of it, and now you start writing your metrics. If you take something like some of the government workbooks that we've created, there's a guy out there named TJ who built an M2131 government compliance workbook for Sentinel.
Big shout out to TJ. Come back on the show.
Friend of the show, TJ. Yep.
Yeah, then you just start there, and now you start applying all of your other baselines around that, because he's pulling in how often is the machine reporting, how often is all this information coming in, where's the proof in the pudding that all this data actually exists, here are my queries. Now all you have to do is take this data and visualize it, and then you've got kind of your compliance dashboard. And some of that story is Purview, some of that story is the data protection and your encryption, but some of the story is Azure Policy. How am I doing Azure Policy? How am I deploying that across my environment? And where does all of this stuff come together? So I think that's where really my skill set lies, is I kind of have my foot in both the security and the compliance world. And now it's about conjoining this data together and building actionable insights that really define risk, as opposed to defining what went bump in the night and where you go and investigate. It's how do I reduce the risk to my organization or whatever the landscape looks like, and then deal with that accordingly.
Well, one of the things that confuses me about the whole Purview thing, insider risk, insider threat, whatever it is that what are you? Are you a Purview practitioner where you have deep product knowledge and implementation, or I'm seeing a lot of requests for risk analysts who may not be very thorough inside of it. Are they the same? Are they different? Is there a handoff? Because they seem to be two different roles.
It is two different roles, but it's two sides of the same coin, right? When it comes down to it, it's just whether you're very tactical in how you're handling things or you're looking more strategically at what's going on. When you take something like insider risk, you can break that out into different organizations. But what it comes down to is, what are people doing that specifically meets the kind of the interests of the organization to make sure everything is okay, right? How do I make sure everything is okay? And I remember watching some Ignite videos a while back where they talked about where insider risk came from. And one of the things they said is that the AI model for an external attacker, someone who gets in the system, is slightly different than the behavior you see out of an insider, a privileged user or someone who has access to privileged content, and how they behave. And you get real crossover when you get in the field. Things like DLP, that crosses over right there. Right. Sometimes people have DLP in compliance. Sometimes they have it in security. To a lot of people and a lot of vendors out there, DLP is part of the security landscape. So back to your question, things like risk analysts are looking at how do I quantify the risk to my organization? Whereas some other folks are coming in and say, what are the actionable insights that I really need to do to pay attention to make my organization secure?
I have to agree with you. We had two previous guests that worked together in some form or fashion, and they could not agree. One person said, risk is when you're looking at compliance. Oh no, data protection. Sorry, DLP was security, and the other one thought it was compliance. And
we always ask the question: is Microsoft Cloud App Security compliance or security?
According to our SKUs, it's both.
Yeah.
Because you can get it in the M365 security SKU, and you can get it in the M365 compliance SKU. So it's the one product we have that straddles the world there for at least our naming conventions to sit in both.
Wow. So I say I'm actually excited that they actually did start calling the products Purview. Because I really had to push in to people saying, hey, listen, there's unfortunately now, based upon what you've said, that there's compliance for infrastructure and compliance for data, right? And I really had to, because basically the infrastructure compliance, when you took a look at the certifications, was really being lost, because whenever compliance came up, everybody thought data, M365 data, and didn't take it serious, right? Do you know Tom Quinn? Do you know that Tom Quinn person?
Tom used to be on the team. Like
gotcha.
He's a CSA he may be in the CSU now. Yeah.
So it was funny. He was on here, and you see, Brody came on because he was our compliance data related person,
information protection guy. yet.
Yeah, the information protection side, and of course, we mentioned, we mentioned this to Tom Quinn. He goes, no, I do real compliance.
Yeah, he was
talking
like,
about
oh,
the infrastructure side. So
you do data security. I do infrastructure. It was like, oh,
I do
okay,
real
well, sorry.
compliance.
Yeah.
It was a joke. You don't have to know, Tom.
Oh.
So,
oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. What's your
I was going to say, I mean, I'll give you another one that'll even pull this even further. If I want to lock down my endpoint so that I look at the data and examine the sensitivity of the data coming across, I'm going into Purview. However, if I want to do something like look at locking down USBs, right, and just preventing certain types of machines from getting USBs, now I'm shifting to endpoint management and moving into that Microsoft marketing term of endpoint management. So I get into ConfigMan and Intune and how the operating system is locked down. And then I move into something like attack surface reduction, which is part of Defender for Endpoint, if I want to start doing vid-PID analysis of the USBs you're plugging in. So if I'm trying to basically control what devices I can put on a system and what information makes it there, I've got 3 different Microsoft products that I have to leverage between endpoint management, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, the attack surface reduction piece, and endpoint DLP to get a complete solution of insight into this thing right here that I'm shaking, and how do I prevent information from going on and off it in an uncontrolled manner.
So
well said. Well said.
So
I'm working with one sec, Frank. I'm working with a law enforcement agency right now, and the toughest thing right now is how do we get officers to get a USB stick from random gas station and plug it into the network, basically, so they can analyze it without compromising the entire network. Right? Yeah, and so and being able to segregate that, give them a PAW or something to that effect, and then vice versa. How do we prevent unintended data exfiltration from going back out, right? And then controls like you talked about, like endpoint DLP and whatnot, and the MDE stack have been brought up. That's why it's just all security and compliance. It's all working together, right? It's not just one thing that's going to solve it. It's a multi-layered approach to managing that.
I have the same use case, actually. I was working with a U.S. federal inspector general's office for an unnamed agency, and they actually have the same thing. When their inspectors get evidence that's provided to them by a source, they want to be able to plug it in and make sure that the source, either knowingly or unknowingly, isn't trying to do bad things to the systems they're plugging in. So we had to go through, like, how does actually endpoint DLP do the scanning, but also what is Microsoft Defender Antivirus doing? How does that actually kick off and do its scanning? And how do all these pieces work together to ultimately not just protect the network, protect the device, but also protect the data?
Well put. Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Now I forgot.
No, couldn't have been important.
So that's true. So tell me about something like SQL Purview. What's the deal with that? Is there like something about the data side now, or that was like a new
so Purview? This is where it gets kind of interesting in Microsoft, because the inside baseball piece of this, and I'm not sure how many listeners you have that are outside Microsoft, but this will resonate and you can translate for me. We still have that kind of function broken out into our data and AI realm versus our compliance realm. So what we're doing there is we're starting to bring analysis of data that's in databases, analysis of data that's everywhere else, unstructured data sitting around the environment. How do I analyze it? How do I bring it together? And Microsoft as a company, we're kind of restructuring how we are internally, and we're waiting for some of that to come through. And without getting too specific to some of the things that we've learned this week, we're trying to better align our product set so that those groups have a while they're building products that integrate together into a platform, that they really are tightly entwined as they do the development cycle to do that. So we're talking about looking at normalizing and analysis of data in databases. Everything from your Oracle database to your SQL Server database to whatever else you have, as well as all the other unstructured sources that may be running around, blob storage, etc. And being able to look at, secure, and analyze risk associated with that type of information. But right now, we're still getting there. So that is a combination where we're trying to work out now as a GBB, what are my rules of engagement with data and AI, so that we go together to explain how the products are there. Because I'm not necessarily a data and AI guy, right? Like, I know enough to be dangerous and break stuff, but I'm not going to be the end all be all arbitrator of that.
Does the Purview related data analysis work across Azure Arc related information?
It's a journey. Some of it's there, some of it's not. So Azure Arc becomes your management plane, right? If you're moving outside of your AMA realm, where you're dealing with your things that are happening internally, Azure Arc is going to be the answer to that. Not everything is plugged in there. So there are pieces that are there. It is coming. They have a lot of things on the roadmap. It's not entirely there. But like I said, actually, I heard a great expression today from a gentleman in compliance, Kevin, who was saying, if we waited for everything to be perfect before we released it, we'd never release anything. So what we
Agile
do is
development.
You define, you make sure it works, and you make sure that the discrete capabilities are defined so the customers understand what it is, and then understand that our cycles are so fast that you're just going to get continuous updates through this, and then you can expand your use cases as the product is continually matures.
So I'm concerned about people learning this more of an umbrella view across the products, right? Because a lot of the certifications are like Microsoft 365 or Azure this, that sort of thing. Even when you take a look at, let's say, SC100, the Purview compliance side of that's not really in there. But the or the data compliance is not in there, but the infrastructure compliance is in there. I forget what's inside AZ500. How do we solve this in people learning, or should those certs actually now start including the data side of the compliance? I mean, how do we solve this learning problem? A new certification that brings all this stuff together. How do we solve this?
So I think that's some of it, right? We've started seeing pieces of it where you can find things like Microsoft Information Protection, where you can find discussions about eDiscovery Premium. We've rebranded it, eDiscovery Premium. But I think there's a lot of value and valid insight. Like if I'm doing a breach investigation, I need to understand how to retrieve and examine email through an eDiscovery case to know what people are looking at, right? Like it just doesn't end with, hey, I've compromised the machine. Yeah, I need to understand where auditing is so that I can understand what kind of searches they were running in SharePoint so that I can see what they were looking for. What were they looking at in Teams? Because that really gets into intent, and particularly in the visibility of nation state actors. Some of our very publicly published nation state actors that we've had attribution for, they're not after compromising devices. They're after the data. They're after exfiltrating the entire Exchange Online environment and then sifting through it to find intelligence. So I think the answer is over time, we're going to have to modularize some of these capabilities and kind of do a mix and match, right? So the reason that you would do eDiscovery for a legal or a FOIA request or some of that public information is going to be slightly different than using the same tools for a law enforcement investigation or a breach investigation. But I think, we're going to have to see that stuff mix and match. It's really weird to go into an SC level certification and find different pieces of the puzzle, and the use cases will vary as to why people need to know that. So
it's almost like they need to have I'll call it compliance, but a compliance architect exam that brings together everything, I would think. So tell me about the unified audit log.
Oh, what would you like to know about it? So the unified audit log is basically where we've taken the Microsoft 365 arena and we've started basically providing a common plane where other things, good dynamics, right, that they can write to a single place. So you have a single source of information that comes in that you can investigate inside of Microsoft 365. I would argue it's a little compliance add-on to that XDR story we've heard so much about with Microsoft. Well, now you're reflecting the same kind of thing in terms of audit. However, it's not the only source of audit information. So you start pulling together the pieces that you have there, and what do you ultimately need to merge it with to have complete visibility? At least from a SaaS perspective, we've got this unified place where we can write all of these different types of events. We can write, Exchange audit information, Teams audit information, SharePoint audit information, as well as things like Dynamics, administrative privileges, who's going into a tenant and making changes. The interesting thing about it is today, if you want to pull that data in with your IaaS and PaaS data, you use Sentinel and you start turning on connectors. But the Office 365 connector is only going to pull in certain data. You got to turn on the Dynamics connector to pull that in with it. So there are different pieces to come together that pull that story.
So this has been my big thing over the past month. I've been trying to get out there, right? Is understanding what the Graph API versus the Unified Audit Log versus the Sentinel connectors actually provide you. Because I see a lot of people dumping information out of UAL, putting it into another SIM, right? And they don't really realize that they can turn on certain Sentinel connectors and get the same information and have the same storage, because a lot of them are worried about the retention period of UAL and the licensing in that area, right? So is there a good reference that talks about what you're getting across the board between those three different data sources for dealing with querying and research and breach and so on? Because I'm having a hard time saying, okay, for this use case that you're most concerned about, the Sentinel connector will have you covered. I can't say that unless I go out and just do a ton of research. And there's nothing that's published to me that's saying Graph API, UAL, Sentinel connectors, and justifying which one should be used when and where and how, and retention and all that other fun stuff. Is there anything out there like that?
Great question.
There is not that I have seen, and that is part of, I think, why I ended up on the team that I ended up, is because I have this. I kind of bridge a lot of these gaps because at one time I was in Microsoft support in the Premier organization. And, that was basically what I did, was have to track down with the CSS engineers how all this stuff gets together. So, how do these things really work under the covers? So there's not. Right now, you have to literally go into each connector. And the funny thing is, this is my opinion. This is not a Microsoft corporate statement. I believe that the connector they built for Office 365, they built specifically to cover the data sources that were free to ingest. So if you look very specifically at the definition of each connector, you will notice not all the Unified Audit Log information is contained within the Office 365 connector. However, all of the information that they read in is covered under certain, is a covered expense under certain licensing agreements, right? Like the E5 deal, where you can bring in a certain amount for free. So I think that's something we sorely need. I think that's part of what I'm empowered to help do, is at least document out how do all these pieces work together, because we have different teams across the Sentinel first party team, across the different API creators, the village that it takes to build all this stuff. And they're all building it slightly differently and then pulling it together. So we need to make sure that we understand where there are gaps, make our customers aware of where there are gaps, and how we're going about addressing it. Now,
I can tell you there's justification to not use Sentinel because of UAL and not having everything easily piped into.
Hold on before you say that. You can get the UAL or the audit data as well as DLP now, because those APIs are exposed. I saw it. Now
the APIs are exposed to pull the information, but it's not like going in and just turning on a connector and going, right? So
no, it's custom connector to get everything you need and understand your landscape. It is custom connector. Am I getting my Power BI data? Am I getting my Dynamics data? I honestly, when I was looking at these, I was doing the analysis you were talking about, Frank, a while ago, and I literally had to read the definitions for each single first-party connector within Microsoft to understand what is it pulling in and what is it not. And the funny thing is, our competition have the same problem. I'm not going to mention any names, but other SIMs that are out there have connectors. They're not pulling in all the data either. If you really dig down into it, you're like, oh, they're only pulling certain elements or data types within the realm of, let's say, Office 365 or M365. Right? They may not be using the streaming API to pull out all network events if they need raw network event types. All those, the network schema within MDE. They're just pulling out alerts and the supporting data through the M365D interface. Yeah. So I think you've got a great point, Frank.
That's super evident, because I'm working on a project with Ren, and we're doing SAP on Sentinel. I can't spell SAP, much less trying to understand. But I learned a lot this week And you're right. You can get the data connectors and get the environment stood up. That's the easy part. The hard part is what relevant data, like in SAP, what do you want to see? You know, someone making changes to customer database, financials, all type of stuff. I don't know. I still can't tell what is actually being pulled in. But we'll do a show on it. We're almost going to have a lab ready to actually show. And I learned a lot on how to deploy SAP in Azure. So it can either take you 3 months or 3 days based on what you read.
Yeah. UAL sends out a lot of considered unstructured data, right? Like what we say in syslog. Mm-hmm. So I think not only pulling that information, but developing the ASIM parsers related into everything else is going to be key. So I think half of the battle is getting the data pushed into Sentinel, the click a button way of doing it, right? But then also looking at an ASIM parser to standardize the structure and be able to use that inside of the other detections that are there is also the other half of that.
So I'm gonna challenge you on this one, Frank, for something to think about for a future podcast. There's a fine line, particularly because we have these SaaS services and security services that are doing this culling up front. There's a fine line between, let's say, having a use case where you pull that in for compliance reasons and building custom features and building a data cemetery where you're pulling in raw data, where you're pulling in raw information that you've already had run through, for example, a Defender service. It's already been examined and culled. So you have to really ask yourself, what is the benefit I have of getting down here? You don't want to end up like some SIMs where the thing that I love about Sentinel, the easiest thing is we have all this pre-built stuff that just kind of works. You don't have to sit there and analyze data and build all these custom detections that take you months to analyze data, look at what's going on and try and figure out what's happening. You want to build a volumetrics program, sure, right? Like there's probably a lot you can get out of building volumetrics and looking at network events and going with what's going on. But you want to balance the need for data and analyzing data and the need and basically recreating something that Microsoft has spent millions to billions of dollars to develop that's doing that for you up front.
So the number one reason why I see people pushing or having their own custom connector and pushing stuff out to a SIM is mainly for retention, right? I think under the licensing requirement, it's 90 days for the premium license or whatever for UAL, right?
A year.
Now,
yeah, it's 90 default year for 10 years.
Okay, for whatever's there. But I think that the reason why I pushed ASIM parsers is because if Microsoft takes that on and develops the ASIM parsers, I don't know if you've worked with ASIM parsers or not. Basically, it's standardizing the data dictionary. So in other words, when I go out and say, show me everything that is connected to this IP address, you're basically calling that function and it will know, oh, look, in SharePoint, we connected here, or whatever. So all of that's done in the background for you to make that happen. So I just see that a lot of people are utilizing UAL in data breach situations, and they're using it as an excuse not to do things the old way and not to utilize Sentinel. Sentinel's not even in the picture. So I'm just saying what I see out there. And so hopefully this is something that is a competitive advantage. Maybe it's you need to have the license or whatever to get the year's worth of retention. I don't know for what's there, but I think with ASIM parsers you can make it standardized and it can be valuable information for the security analyst.
Well, I can say with a high degree of certainty what you just described is coming, because I was on a call 2 weeks ago with a very large customer that makes shoes. And this was a request, exactly what Frank is talking about. So that is going to happen. Myself and Matt Stoley, we're working on it, Mike. And they had some legitimate requests, and it was around the same scenarios that you just discussed, Frank, right? Whether it be external threats, we need to know what they did while they were there, right? Because it may not be as obvious as data exfiltration. Just looking at it means that the integrity and confidentiality of that data has been compromised, right? I could change something in it, change the formula in your SERM, or change something like the weld time in a manufacturing place. So instead of doing a frame weld for 5 seconds, you do a frame weld for 3. Now you got to recall millions of cars because they wouldn't even change the document and be able to do something. So I've seen it. And another thing I can't share with, Frank, I'll share with you and Brody. You were asking, is there a place where it documents what those data connectors actually bring in? There is a place, but it's only at Microsoft. I put it in the chat to you, Mike. Take a look at it. You'll see it in Azure DevOps, where you can go through and you can see exactly what they're doing, right? So it's sort of like the secret sauce behind it, but a public-facing document I have yet to see. And then the other thing, Sysmon, Syslog, and all that other stuff that we were talking about, I think I shared that with you, Brody. There's an internal document about that too that really goes down into the engineering. So those things are being addressed. When they're going to come out,
people have to join the private community that from our guests from last week and find out from there.
Yeah, Katrina, big shout out. Put us in the know. Put Frank in the know. But so Mike, what do you believe you're going to spend most of your time in your new role? What are you going to be doing versus building, and building versus doing? Where do you see yourself coming in and making an impact to help solve some of these problems like Frank had?
Oh, well, I think there's a couple things. My primary day job apparently will be the fact that I am extremely in depth with what we call our sovereign clouds, but that's kind of off to the side. That's for a topic for another day. Is helping customers, particularly as they see CMMC and other regulations move into some of these sovereign clouds like government. But from that perspective, I know that some of the conversations I was having at the baseball game last night when we saw the Mariners. Tough game, by the way. Tough game. Congratulations, Padres. That we were talking about how we can take some of these compliance manager templates and map in the same regulations exist, whether they're IaaS or SaaS, right? How can we take some of these regulations and map them over in the IaaS realm so that they can get and then feed this data into Sentinel so they can have a conjoined view of how their SaaS environment lines up to their regulation and how their IaaS environments line up to the regulations as well. We've got a great story right now. When you have Defender for Cloud, when you have something like Purview Compliance Manager, we need to pull that data together because no organization just lives in SaaS or just lives in IaaS. There are some things coming, but really the work, and once again, shout out to TJ because he did this for the White House Cyber Executive Order, is just mapping the regulations into controls. And we've got that with CIS. We've done it some places, but not everywhere, not the highly regulated industries. So I think I'll brush off some KQL skills and we'll do some mapping and we'll make that happen. And at least we'll have a starting point that we can share with customers. We can get feedback from them. We can make those templates better. And honestly, those templates, I'm all about open sourcing those templates, right? Let's get them out there. Let's get people to feedback. That's what I love about KQL. It's not your, your SQL of old where you're able to do, manipulation you're just looking at data. You're not manipulating the structures, the actual input. You're just visualizing it. So I think that's going to be the key is building easy to use visualizations that everybody can share together and just get that knowledge. So that's where I hope to spend a lot of my time.
Yeah. You come up to speed quickly on KQL, go through Rod Trent's Must Learn KQL series. Highly recommend it.
You sound like you're near the DC area doing all this government work.
I do. Well, I'm in Redmond today, but yeah, I am right outside of DC in Virginia. So
we'll have to go to lunch or dinner sometime because that's where I'm at.
Don't fall for it, Mike. Don't fall for it. He'll leave you at the altar. Make you seem like you're the creepy guy at the bar by yourself.
You mean he's not going to skip out on the check? He's not going to order the most expensive
He's just going to skip out on you.
Disappear halfway through.
Surf and turf and out. Yeah.
So it's a lot. I don't envy your job. I think that compliance is the case study of moving target, right? And we try to make it think that the target is not moving because we have regulatory frameworks that are supposed to be the 4 legs on the target. They're moving too. They move just like this to move the target. But you're working with Matthew Lillerton. He's pretty solid. You're able to get some stuff done with him, right? TJ. Well, TJ's
and you're the first person I've talked to from Microsoft that actually has combined infrastructure and data when talking about compliance.
Right.
You are actually the first one that I've talked to.
It's usually so segregated, and it shouldn't be, to your point, especially for breach investigation, which I think was a really important point you brought up earlier, Mike. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. If Mike Lloyd doesn't know anything, he knows job security. He pulls the right draw. I'm the only person that can do that here. So that's me.
I was just spying Mike Lord on LinkedIn. Gold Club winner 2022. Congrats, Mike. Crushing it. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so, but I don't have any other questions. I know that the topics that you discussed, we'd love to have you back on because
absolutely
we go in depth to some of those. Frankly, sort of gave out a chart about guests on the show and topics. You fit both sides, right? We'll narrow it down to one thing and try to go through it. Bro, you got any other questions for Mr. Lloyd? I know he wants to get back to his breakout.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have another sports game to go to tonight or whatever else you're doing. But no, I'm really interested to hear how your role evolves and what you get to work on and how you're marrying all of these different topics down the road, Mike, because I think that's just a really interesting aspect. I only started getting into compliance, information security when I joined Microsoft. I was more security focused, infrastructure focused prior. And then in consulting and engagements became like, hey, this is a hot button thing. You want to get into it? And so that's where I've started learning more of the data protection aspect of it. I really think you really brought it all together with breach investigations and not trying to segregate things into different silos. I hate when that happens, either internally or externally. We need to be looking broadly across all the different capability sets in order to get people the information they need to either make risk decisions, inform themselves on items that have happened, potential breaches or regulatory instances that have fallen by the wayside. I think the role you're stepping into is very important, and I can't wait to have you back to talk about what's been done and what we are looking forward to in the future. So thank you very much for being a surprise guest today. We really appreciate it.
And then, once you come on the show, you have to host the show. So some of us on vacation. So you'll be a host here. You'll be a host here pretty soon.
Brody needs to film another version of Hard Liquor and Hunting this winter, so he'll need to fill in.
Yeah, it might be a late night. Good thing tomorrow's Friday. We'll put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks, Mike.
We're going to close the show out, but I did have one more thing about MDI. I'll save it for the next show. I have a pet peeve. Ricky Simpson, if you're out there listening, we're going to get you back on in regards to alerting on that sensor health and where it is not showing up where I believe it should be showing up, right?
And Microsoft just did a good webcast on MDI. So out there on their YouTube security channel, that's worth the watch.
Yeah, I think I got it keyed up on one of my tabs right here. I may go back and try to watch it. So, well, Mr. Lloyd, thank you so much for taking time out your busy schedule. You and I are struggling with the time zone. I know I am, right? Keeping us out late and getting us up and got to be here at 7:30 is eating me up.
You went west. You're from it's like when I have to go east, it's way worse. You guys are coming west.
He normally goes to bed at 7 p.m. at nighttime and gets up at 3 a.m. So think about the.
You need a sleeping mask, like a nice feathered sleeping mask, and then
I need one. I need to put some of those little cucumbers on my eyes.
Yeah, there you go.
Put that right on my eyes.
Are you guys there all week?
Today was a good day. I don't have anyone chopping through my door with an axe talking about it's dinner time.
Right.
And so, it's an inside joke. My wife, generally, she's upstairs stumping around. It's time to eat dinner. It's time to cook. Let's go.
Go find a good restaurant tonight, gentlemen. Enjoy your time in Redmond.
Oh, they're taking us somewhere nice tonight.
Good. You deserve
it. I'll still wait for that.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Mike.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Mike. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Great. Thanks. Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.